It's a poker night for Raul Mendoza and his friends.
There was a situation that happened that escalated that card situation.
Raul's family gets a call in the middle of the night. Police have found Raul's car.
We're calling his phone and the tow truck driver answers too. So then we're like, okay, that's not right. We saw that there was a bullet hole in the driver's side. That's when we panicked.
Somebody knew it wasn't normal. There was something going on.
The search for Raul Mendoza is on. Houston, Texas, fourth largest city in America.
Houston, Texas is at the confluence of two bayous, which is a lot of water. It is one of the most diverse populations in metropolitan USA.
We have seen, unfortunately, within the last few years, I'm sure you've heard in the media, I mean, it's reported the murder rate has gone sometimes double in some jurisdictions. Luckily here in Houston, Harris County, we haven't, our murder rate did increase, but not as big as compared to other jurisdictions. A lot of violent crimes, a lot of shootings, more shootings.
March 15, 2006, Raul Mendoza plays poker with friends.
My brother had a group of friends that he played cards with a lot.
Usually 4 to 6 to 8 guys getting together, you know, neighborhood buddies, you know, nickels and dimes, just to have fun, just to kill time and, you know, just enjoying each other's company, really.
They get together in the old neighborhood and nothing crazy, nothing violent, they just play. They just play, you know, cards, poker for as long as they play, whoever, you know, loses their money first.
After midnight, Raul's mother, Polly, answers the phone.
It was very late, it was past midnight, and the phone rings, and we get a phone call, and it's a tow truck driver that they have my brother's vehicle. They towed it from 2nd Ward near an address and wanted to know what to do with it. Well, we knew that he had gone to play cards. We figured, hey, maybe they ended up so close to downtown. Maybe they ended up going to a club, because we didn't know exactly where it had been towed from.
Didn't look right. But the car was not reported stolen at the time, so they had no idea what could have happened. The constable's office reached out to the family saying, hey, we found your car here at the middle intersection. So the family went out to the location and to look at the car and have the car towed back to the house.
When Raul's family inspects his car, they notice some troubling clues.
We're calling his phone and the tow truck driver answers too. So then we're like, okay, that's not right. He never goes anywhere without his BlackBerry. It wasn't until the car actually arrived at our house that when we started inspecting that we saw that there was a bullet hole in the driver's side and a little bit of blood. So that's when we panicked.
Raul's family fears the worst. His sister Yanira travels to the 2nd Ward to search for him, along with Raul's girlfriend, Jennifer.
First person that I thought to call was his girlfriend. I just asked her, hey, have you talked to my brother? Have you seen him? Have you heard from him? She's like, no, the last time I talked to him, he was playing cards, you know, at his friend's house, but I haven't talked to him since then. And I said, well, his car just got towed here. There's, you know, some things that we're worried about. I need to find him. And she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna get dressed, come pick me up.
Yanira and Raul's girlfriend, Jennifer, searched the streets of Houston for any sign of Raul.
We just drove out there and we started looking in warehouses, dumpsters, everywhere that we thought he would be.
Night turns into day, and the Mendozas' desperate search for Raul comes up empty.
At this point, I'm calling all my friends. Hey, have you guys, because my brother and I had mutual friends. Have you heard from my brother? Has anybody seen my brother? I can't find my brother. Can you come help me look for him? And we go back to where they found his car. So we go there, and lo and behold, he had gone to Mardi Gras, and he had these giant balls, a beaded necklace, but they were giant, and they were shattered on the floor. And so that was one of the pieces. And I'm like, okay, well, somebody had to have seen something. And we asked neighbors, talked to neighbors, and finally someone came and said, yeah, there was a struggle. We saw there was a struggle. They were, forcing him in the car. And we're just like, okay, well, did you call anyone? Did anything happen? And at that point we were stuck. We didn't know what to do. Where do we go from there? Time was passing. No one knew anything. We didn't know the whole story. So we were kind of at a standstill. So by that point, my mom was completely panicked. She was just stressed. She's like, I don't know what to do. She's like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna find him? We have something bad. She's like, I know something bad happened. So we call the police after we go back to where the car was found, and we see all these things. And they actually mentioned Texas EquuSearch, because we said we don't know what to do. And we couldn't file a missing persons report. We couldn't do anything, we had to wait. And my mom was not about that. She did not want to wait.
Raul's mother, Polly, calls Texas EquuSearch, a nonprofit search and rescue organization.
And they initially started out searching on horseback, and now they have spread not only throughout Texas, but throughout many countries, states, I believe all over the place. They're doing this for communities volunteering to search for people.
They do a great job. Mr. Tim Miller, he's the founder of this organization. He has a great group of volunteers with all proper equipment, and they do train together. They have great process and procedure in place. They have done wonderful things within our jurisdiction.
He had a team come in and they set up shop, if you will, in the gym, like a little gym that they had there. And he had volunteers on top of volunteers come in, and everyone was ready, willing, and able to help. He had all the resources, and nearby was a bayou. So he had the resources to get boats out there. He had people that were searching fields. He was the person that knew exactly what to do and was gonna get it done.
The homicide unit is put on the case.
So by the time we got assigned to it, it was much later after the fact. The car's already been moved. Everybody's pretty much gone, so we just had to go back and re-canvass the area. The driver's side mirror was broken off. There were some dents, there was some damage on the side, the left side, the driver's side of the car. There was a bullet hole, but it was wedged in between the rubber piece of where the window is. So it was kind of hard to see. We just kind of poke around and notice it, but if standing from afar, you wouldn't see it. And the family already reached out to our EquuSearch. And so they already got the ball rolling ahead of us. So we just reach out, make contact with the organization and start doing a search for the body, assuming that something, that he could have been murdered.
Police go back to the neighborhood where Raul's car was found.
As we canvass and speak with more neighbors, it becomes apparent that this intersection is right next to a public park. It's a baseball field where it's very widely used. And so some of the neighbors heard kind of like a screeching sound, cars speeding and stopping, because the car had hit a fence, so it obviously created, noise. So, and it was driving in an erratic manner. So that's caught, some of the neighbors' attention. So they look out the window, see this car, this silver Magnum, pulled up to the intersection at the stop sign, and they see a few guys getting out the car, and then a few minutes later they see an SUV coming by, and that's when all these males that just got out of the silver Magnum got into the Blazer and took off. And so they thought it was suspicious, and again, because the Magnum was just there in the middle of the intersection with the doors open, and it just kind of left abandoned, and no one came back to it.
Local witnesses connect Raul's car to several men and a dark-colored SUV.
Again, with no body, nothing concrete, he's just not available, not, missing. So we were really hoping that, okay, something could have gone wrong, he could have left to go somewhere, but hopefully he'd come back. But as we begin to interview families and backtracking his whereabouts and trying to make contact with people that would have known where he is, it just, not getting the clear answer, and no one could really pinpoint exactly where he is. So that's when we again start looking at the possibility of a murder.
So we drove around for as long as we could. It was daylight by that time and nothing. We found nothing. So dropped them off and I went back home. And I went back home and explained to my mom, we drove everywhere. I didn't see anything. And so I got dressed, got a cup of coffee, and I was like, I'm going back out again. At this point, I'm calling all my friends.
4 days after his car was found abandoned, a call comes in from Texas EquuSearch.
They had a drone and they had boats, and that day they were gonna go through the bayou. One of my brother's friends that he was very close with, that he went to school with, happened to be on the boat that went out that day. And they sent the drone over, and from my understanding, they found what seemed to be something that had been undisturbed and was just kind of floating there.
In a moment like this, every second counts. Police know that someone has the answers, but how this case unravels will shock everyone.
Raul Mendoza plays a poker game with friends, but leaves the game and is never seen again. Raul's car is found abandoned, with his cell phone and ID still inside.
There was a situation that happened that escalated that card situation.
When you hear that there was something going on at the poker game, acting strangely, you automatically think something is going on amongst the players.
4 days after his car was found abandoned, a call comes in from Texas EquuSearch.
And so Tim Miller, along with my brother's friend, went out and recovered his body. And the only way they were able to identify was by the clothes he was wearing.
So EquuSearch did find the body and reach out to our dive team. So we sent our Marine unit, our dive team, out to help recover the body.
Raul is found floating in a Houston bayou, recognizable only by the color of his clothes. Raul's body is recovered from Buffalo Bayou and taken in for examination.
During the autopsy, they find evidence of aquatic activity in the form of abrasions around Raul's head and face, suggesting that he'd been in the water for quite some time. Coroners also note a gunshot wound to the top of Raul's head and another to his left temple.
The question now becomes, who would want to murder Raul Mendoza?
We start off with the family, the immediate family, Mr. Mendoza's mom, brother, sister, and trying to make contact with his girlfriend. So his inner circle, immediate family, was where we start off to understand get his profile, if you will, understand who he is, what he is, what he does, who his inner circle might be, and what his daily activities might look like. Mr. Mendoza, after high school, he joined the Navy, served honorably for 4 years, and discharged from the United States Navy. Came home, started going to community college, part-time while working main intercontinental airport for United Airlines as a baggage handler. So he had a steady job, going to school, recently, discharged honorably, serving the country. So by all counts, an outstanding, upstanding citizen.
I'm the oldest, so oldest of four. He is months apart, year apart. We was born in '82, so very close, very close. Went to school together, grew up together, partied together, and then he went off to the military, but we were still very close, still communicated, wrote letters, whatever we could at the time. He really had no plans after high school, not sure really what he wanted to do. He wanted to pursue music, he just didn't know how. He loved music, he loved, rapping and things like that, and he surrounded himself with friends that did the same thing. But at that point in time, that's kind of, the Navy was where he went. So he was gone for about 4 years. And while overseas, he dated, did things, partied, whatever, but he would come home every so often. So that's how he ended up reconnecting again with his girlfriend.
Police investigate Raul's relationship with his girlfriend, Jennifer.
I think it started off okay. I wouldn't say healthy, but it started off, they saw each other while he was home on leave at a club. Exchanged numbers, talked, and he just maintained communication with her once he went back. But at the time, he had also, I think, just gotten out of a relationship with a girl he had been with that he had just met in the Navy, but he was in a relationship with her. I think they had broken up, and so while here, he saw Jennifer. They stayed in communication. Every time he came home, he would see her, but then it just got a little possessive and just toxic. Just a little scary, not healthy at all.
Raul's family questions whether a trip to South Padre Island might have been a factor in Raul's murder.
She wanted to go out of town. It was spring break, and she wanted to fly to South Padre. And at the time, he didn't want to. It was gonna be too expensive. He just didn't have the time, so he didn't want to fly out, and she was persistent. By that time, their level of toxicity in their relationship was sky high. There were red flags everywhere, and she had already developed a very possessive personality to him. And so she was very jealous, and it was what she wanted when she wanted. And it didn't matter what it took, she just wanted what she wanted.
Due to Jennifer and Raul's contentious relationship, the Mendozas wondered if Jennifer had a hand in Raul's murder.
She said a lot of things, she made a lot of threats, and so that's where it led him to say, hey, you know what, I'm not gonna deal with this, we're not gonna go out of town, I'm going to play cards.
At the poker game, Raul makes plans with Jennifer's cousin, Polo, who owes him money.
What we were told, I think Mendoza was planning on a weekend trip with his girlfriend, and he needed that portion of the money to go, to spend with his girlfriend for that weekend to South Padre Island. We heard about Polo early on because when Mendoza left the home, he informed his family that he was going to meet up with Polo so that Polo can repay him the money owed. So that was the first indication that we knew that would have been the last person that would have been with Mendoza. Secondly, when we reached out to Mendoza's girlfriend, same thing. She informed us that Mendoza told her that he was going to meet with Polo.
Polo is a childhood friend of the Mendozas.
Polo wasn't out of jail very long because he had been in and had gotten out recently, and I guess he was in a bind, and he knew my brother was working, he had the means, of course. He had a great job, so I don't think Jennifer at the time had a job, so he was more so the financial person in the relationship. So asked if he could borrow it. Of course, my brother always had a good heart. He would not tell you no, he'd give you the shirt off his back. He let him borrow the money, and I'm not sure what he let him use it for, what he said the reason was for it, but he ended up eventually saying yes and loaned him money. My brother wasn't one to hound for it, so not sure exactly how long he had let him borrow it.
A couple things kind of raised our suspicion. Polo was not the best character. Come to find out that he was recently released from Texas Department of Corrections, our prison. Spent several years in prison for an aggravated assault, so he's known to be violent. He was on parole, but violated parole by cutting his ankle monitor. So we knew he was not, he was up to no good. The other thing that kind of raised our suspicion was the fact that when Mendoza's girlfriend, who was Polo's cousin, reached out to Polo just trying to say, hey, did you ever get a hold of my boyfriend? What happened? Polo was very vague in his answers. didn't really give a good straight answer of whether or not he did meet up with Mendoza or he didn't. He was just like, I'll talk to you later, I'll get back with you. It wasn't making sense. So that's where, again, the suspicion arises. And of course, not knowing his whereabouts either. No one knows where Polo is, you know, and then shortly after his initial conversation with his cousin, he wouldn't answer a phone anymore. And so no one was able to get hold of him. So his whereabouts was in question. So all these little clues were leading to, again, not saying that he could have done anything or he was the actual suspect, but just by his behavior kind of caused us to say we need to concentrate on Polo just to get to the bottom of it, see what else can he lead us to.
I knew him, I had history with him, and I said, he acted like, again, he was asleep. I had woken him up, and I said, hey, my brother is missing, I can't find him. I know you met up with him, I know you talked to him, what can you tell me? He said, Yanira, I'm just as worried as you are, but I don't know. And after that, I said, okay. I said, well, I need you to meet up with me. He says, give me a little bit, I'm gonna get dressed and I'll call you. And I said, okay. I said, but you need to call me. And he said, okay, I'm gonna call you. And that was it. I called him, voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. He never showed up, he never called me back. So at that point, I call, I don't even know how I got his dad's number, but I called his dad. And I said, hey, your son knows something. If you don't tell him to call me and tell me what he knows, I'm putting his name all over the news. And he's like, why would you do that? You know, we have history. He would never do anything like that. I can't believe you think that. I said, okay, well, if he's innocent, he has nothing to hide. He needs to call me. And after that, I let the detectives know, hey, this is not right. You know, this is who you need to start, you know, talking to. And you need to talk to Jennifer because I just have a feeling she's involved too. And that's how we got the ball rolling on that.
So when he went there while waiting for Polo, that's when he, again, hooked up with his friends, and just at that time, his friends were having a poker night, poker game, so he joined, hung out while waiting for Polo to show up.
I guess, you know, Polo felt a type of way, or he felt a little offended because he was being, you know, asked for it. But it wasn't anything aggressive. He wasn't aggressive about it when he asked. He just said, hey, I'm gonna go play some cards with some friends. Is there any way you have that money for me? So potentially he could, you know, play with that.
$330. Yeah, just $330. By all accounts, Polo never showed up at the meeting place, the agreed upon meeting place. So we never got a clear understanding what transpired after that, but somehow we know for a fact that Polo never showed up to the agreed upon location where the poker game was being held. And at some point they made connection and met off. I think they agreed to meet at a liquor store a little bit further down the street, you know, within the neighborhood, but definitely not at that house. So I don't know how all that was communicated, but at some point they agreed to meet at the liquor store. And so that's how they all got together.
So my understanding is that he was contacted by Polo to say, hey, let's meet up at this liquor store by where you are playing cards at, because Polo also grew up in that neighborhood, had friends that lived in the same neighborhood, so he kind of knew the ins and outs of things. And that was his way of, if you will, luring him there with the intent of paying him money.
After 4 days of searching, the Mendoza family get the news that no family wants to hear. Raul has been found in a Houston bayou, shot twice in the head. The family immediately questions whether Raul's girlfriend, Jennifer, knows something she's not sharing.
Raul plans to meet Jennifer's cousin Polo in front of a nearby liquor store to collect the $350 that he's owed. And that's the reason why Raul ends up leaving the poker game.
Police try to track down Polo to get some answers, but Polo is nowhere to be found.
We got an arrest warrant just to bring him in for questioning regarding this particular incident. So once we got an arrest warrant for Polo, again, had no idea where he could have been, because no one, I mean, he basically cut contact with everybody. The best opportunity would be either his girlfriend or his obviously immediate family. So we start off at the girlfriend's home first. So, we did surveillance at the house. I have no sign of him being in there, but just want to see if we can hopefully catch him going in or out, or find the girlfriend and just have a conversation with her to see if she knows where his whereabouts is. But as we go up to the house, Polo was on his way downstairs opening the door for her. So as we were walking up, I look in, I see Polo. He sees us, he immediately turns around and goes back upstairs. We call for him out, say, we identify ourselves, and ask him to come out. And he actually came back out. So he came down to meet with us after a couple minutes. We later learned, according to his statement, that when he was on his way down, he had a gun on him. And when he saw us, he turned right back around to put the gun away. And then so that he can come down unarmed.
They couldn't find him first, so they found him hidden in the neighborhood where we grew up at his girlfriend's house. They take him into custody and he acts like he has no idea what's going on. So they begin to question him, and he tells an entirely completely different story. That, my brother was flashy, and my brother was this, and, that my brother, was aggressive towards him, trying to retrieve this money.
So after we arrested him, we brought him back to our office for an interview, and we went back and identified all the holes, all the inconsistencies, and sharing with him what we know about what transpired, and through our witnesses' accounts, and really just call him out on his lies. Did meet with Mendoza, but and they were going to commit a robbery together, but they changed their mind, and he basically left Mendoza at the house where they were thinking about committing a robbery.
Polo tells police that Raul was involved in planning the robbery, but this doesn't align with what investigators know about him.
Again, we have no indication. Mendoza, clean record, spent 4 years in the Navy, honorably discharged, came home, attend local community college, working as a baggage handler with United Airlines. By all count, stand-up individual, so not known to commit any crimes. We allow him just to talk, just to kind of lay out his side of the story, just to build that baseline.
This is a typical good interview being done with Polo, where you have an experienced homicide investigator, and he's obviously leading out the questions in the right way, because obviously Polo denies it at first, and so you now take a little different tactic. You start throwing out some of the circumstantial evidence, some of the facts that that he doesn't think and eventually he starts to realize, oh, they're closing in on me. They're closing in. I got to say something here to get myself out of the hot seat. So he says, yes, I'm aware, but I didn't do it. I know who did it. It was these two guys.
So eventually he turned around and pretty much, confessed, but he pretty much implicated himself being there and being part of the murder.
Polo points to Joseph Bird Godin and Paul Slim Betancourt as the other two men.
He basically identified other individuals that were with him on the night of the incident. Going back through our notes, we did not know at the time, but when we were canvassing the neighborhood and trying to backtrack and trying to identify Polo and who could have seen or known Mendoza's whereabouts, we actually stumbled on individual, well, the last name was Godin, who goes by Bird. We did not know that he was an active participant in the incident. We were thought he was just another local neighborhood person that kind of inner circle with that group. So we have spoken with him before, but didn't realize he was tied to it. We were just walking around knocking on doors and hey, what's your name, and have you heard or seen anything? And during our first interaction with him, he claimed he didn't know anything. So we just move on to the next person. But luckily, we document every person that we meet. So once we got a chance to speak with Polo, we realized that we have already made initial contact with this individual named Bird. The information that we receive is from a co-defendant. Usually that doesn't hold a whole lot in court, because it's just implicating each other. But we have no physical evidence at this point that Bird was indeed there. So this is a he said, she said.
Now the investigation kicks in, and it goes very well. This is a real 1, 2, 3 type of investigation. It's working very good once it gets fired up. But there is no evidence. You can't use verbal confessions when there's no physical evidence to corroborate it.
In a rare move, Polo actually agrees to take them back to the scene of the murder.
But it's been a few days, so it was hard for us to tie back where it could have happened. During our interview with Polo, and once he confessed and we built that relation, we will build that trust, and he was ready to kind of open up and share not everything, but as much as he decided he would. He actually agreed to take us back to the scene, so which is somewhat rare also on most of our investigations. Most of the time, the suspect, the defendant, they may cooperate, but not to the extent of taking us back to the scene. With Polo, he did. After he confessed, we asked if he would take us back to the scene. He agreed, so we all got into a car, and he basically showed us the route, how it all happened, where they met up at the liquor store, where they went, how the car stopped at the intersection, how they abandoned the car, and where they went after that, and how they drove up to York Bridge, basically stopped on the highest level of the bridge, got out, forced Mendoza to get out, and and point us out to approximately where Mendoza was shot. What was interesting about this particular case, and definitely someone was watching over all of us, because again, it's a good sized bridge, and we were just making a random, just when Polo asked us, hey, I think this is where we pull over, we pull over. We get out of the car, and Polo kind of walk us up to the bridge. He was walking backward, and he actually stepped on the shell casing. And we heard that clink, and then he kind of looked down, and he's like, oh my gosh, there's a shell casing. So we were literally at the exact spot where the murder happened. And this is days later. Of course, it's a heavy travel bridge, cars, drive by it, all day long, every day. And several days later, the shell casing was right there. I actually get goosebumps talking about it, because that was kind of unheard of. It's kind of a interesting moment.
Police take Bird into custody and charge him with murder.
So we go back to Bird's house. Luckily, when we walked up, Bird was right outside in front of his house. So we engaged in a conversation with him and just invited him back to our office for an interview. So he did. He lodged and came back to us and began talking to us. Again, through the series of conversation, the interview, eventually Bird came around and admitted his role in the murder.
Soon after, Paul Betancourt, aka Slim, is taken into custody, as well as charged with aggravated robbery.
Slim was the driver of the SUV. His role in this whole ordeal was practically just driving the car. I mean, he knew, he was contacted by Polo to join, the group with the intention of committing the robbery. After the investigation, at least all the information that we've come to know, he didn't have a gun on him. He was just an active participant in the sense that he was driving the car.
But police would soon discover there's more to the story than they first imagined. Navy veteran Raul Mendoza attends a poker game with friends.
Raul plans to meet Jennifer's cousin Polo at the poker game.
And so that's where he calls my brother and says, hey, I finally have that money, with no intent of ever paying him back, of course.
Raul's car is found abandoned, and area witnesses say 4 men leave the car and hop into a dark-colored SUV.
As the pressure mounts during the interrogation, Polo begins to change his story. Now he admits to being involved in the murder, but says there's 2 other men that helped him do it.
And what was interesting about this particular case, Polo actually agreed to take us back to the scene. And because when we found the body, it was floating in the Bayou, but it doesn't tie back to exactly where the body was dumped. You know, we had no way of knowing where the crime actually happened. We know where we found the body.
Jennifer and Polo have been in contact back and forth. So she knows every move that my brother's making, where he's at, who's he with, things like that. And she's feeding that information to Polo. To which, you know, she goes back and she tells him, we've got into an argument, it got physical, he did this to me, and it enrages him.
Polo never showed up at the meeting place, the agreed upon meeting place. So we never got a clear understanding what transpired after that, but somehow we know for a fact that Polo never showed up to the agreed upon location where the poker game was being held. And at some point they made connection and met off.
At that point, he lures him down to a local liquor store in the neighborhood. So from my understanding, once they reach that liquor store, Polo and a friend, two guys actually, they pull up in a truck, and one of the guys never gets out.
The two men are Joseph Bird-Godin and Paul Slim Betancourt.
Initially, Polo tells Bird and Slim that they're going to rob a liquor store, but eventually he confesses the truth. They're going to rob Raul.
They smash his window. They tell him to move over, and Polo gets into the front. One has him in the back seat with a gun to his head, and they tell him just to drive. They drove around for probably about an hour or two and realized their intent was only, from what was told, was to scare him.
Raul is taken into Slim's SUV, and they drive Raul away.
An active participant in the sense that he was driving the car, driving Polo and Bird around, and he followed Mendoza in his silver Magnum. And then, of course, when they ditched the car, the Magnum, at the intersection by the stop sign, they all got into Slim's car, and that's where Slim drove everybody up to the bridge, the York Bridge, where Mendoza was murdered. So he was the driver the whole time.
Because of the people that he knew in the neighborhood that he was friends with or he plays cards with, they panicked and said, hey, he knows a lot of people, you know, we need to figure out what we're gonna do.
At some point, they realize the plan is flawed. They can't just let Raul go when they're done with him.
Slim's SUV takes the four men to a bridge high above the Buffalo Bayou.
They can't let him go at this point. They have to something has to be done because he's gonna go tell his friends. They have him at the bayou, and of course there's the railing of a bayou, and then you have that part underneath. That is a pretty large opening. And they have him there, and he shoots once and he misses, and he grazes the side, because you definitely can tell that in the autopsy report. And then the second time, he mentions my brother asking him not to do it, and they shoot him in the head, and they roll his body underneath the railing into the water.
Raul's body falls down into the darkness of the Buffalo Bayou.
What's also unique about this case is, again, we always stay in touch with the family. In most cases, we stay in touch, and there's always some kind of bond.
And the family is obviously tight. It's a loving, caring family, and they push and push to get this thing going and do all the things that really made this case happen. And it's a rare case where you have family, community, then law enforcement.
Somehow we just naturally have that extra bond. And I remember during the Mendoza's wake, we would go back and visit the family and actually had a nice dinner with family, with grandma and everything. So it was very warm, family oriented. And this case kind of stuck with me because of that extra bond with the family.
But to bring justice and closure to the Mendoza family, police will need to prove their claims in court. Jose Polo Niva and Joseph Bird-Godin are each tried for the murder of Raul Mendoza, as Raul's entire family looks on.
At that point, my mom wasn't doing well, and having to see him just sit there, and he had no remorse. He never once would look at my mom, but I did a victim impact statement, and as I'm speaking, he's just looking at me with a smirk and just, I don't know, just cold and dead inside. Just a smirk like, you know, you're not gonna know who did it.
Slim, the driver, testifies that Bird was the one who pulled the trigger.
When you have 3 suspects that grabbed him from his vehicle and subsequently killed him, the difficulty is finding out who pulled the trigger. Was there multiple guns? Was there a single gun? What type of gun? Finding the shell casing on the bridge gives them the forensic capability to go to a firearms analytical section and trace that shell back to a gun. When they do the search warrants on the properties, they find a gun in Bird's house, which matches that shell casing, which matches the stories that they've got from the suspects as they've interviewed them that Bird was actually the trigger guy. So they now have him. It was the shell casing on the bridge that gave them the physical evidence to put it to the gun they found at his residence, which was used in the crime. Again, textbook case.
Both Polo and Bird are convicted of first-degree murder.
Satisfaction, closure for the family, because that's what it's all about. You know, we can't undo the past, right? But our commitment to the family, each and every case, is to find closure for the victim's family. And so every time that we solve a case, and especially getting confession, because a lot of cases, unfortunately, we don't get confessions all the time. Most of it's built on physical evidence. We can build a very strong case based on physical evidence, but it's always an icing on the cake when you have a confession by the defendant tying back, verifying, validating all the physical evidence that we find. So it's very rewarding when we do that, but most importantly is that we know now we can pick up the phone and inform the family, we got this, you know, we got the case resolved, suspect in custody, charged, the case is closed.